Why, oh why, is it almost always something in the Crystal Tower whenever we queue for Alliance Roulette? There's actually a few reasons, and it isn't even limited to Alliance Roulette, so let's talk about that. Well, with that said, let's start with focusing on Alliance Raid Roulette, right? So, there are 4 key reasons why the most common Alliance Raid series to land in when you queue the roulette is the Crystal Tower series. The first one, the most obvious one, is that unlike all other Alliance raids, the Crystal Tower series is mandatory to complete a Realm Reborn. You cannot complete the main quest, A Time to Every Purpose, in patch 255 without completing the entire Crystal Tower series, even if it isn't really story relevant until Shadowbringers begins. You could argue that this timing comes from the reasoning that time would have to pass from us finishing the Crystal Tower to the start of Shadowbringers. Which is fair, but also a huge sidetrack to what we're actually talking about. Anyway, this means that 100% of players that have access to Alliance Raid Roulette are bound to have access to, well, at least the Labyrinth of the Ancients and Circus Tower, and probably also the World of Darkness. The second reason is the simple fact that none of the other Alliance Raid series bar entry to content that is mandatory or necessary for progression in the current stage of the game. The Shadow of Mahak raid series, the whole thing, unlocks the 6.2 part of an optional side quest series from Endwalker. And most, if not all of the gear from these raids are not dyeable, and a lot of it have craftable options that are dyeable. So the main motivation to go here is for that one side quest, or minions, or for the story itself. The Return to Ivalice series unlocks access to Bozja and the Shadowbringers relic weapons, as well as an extreme encounter. Doesn't drop a mount though, not to mention a part of this story is brought up later in the game too. Certainly, there are more incentives to go here since an entire series of content with Bozja is locked behind this, not to mention the Delubrum Reginae Savage Cerberus mount. The Shadowbringers relic weapons are also still relevant, insofar that all ultimates not from Endwalker recommend these weapons as part of their best in slot lists due to their customizable stats. Presumably the Endwalker relic weapons will take that spot once they are fully upgradable in patch 6.55? Oh right, this series of raids also had a funny significance to blue mages when they unlocked level 70. As the chest piece from the Orborn Monastery was considered the second best option after Eureka's elemental chest piece for spell speed focused blue mages. And the ease of obtaining this compared to going to Eureka was a lot more manageable to a lot of players. The Yorha Dark Apocalypse series is somehow worse off than the other two, as it unlocks nothing outside of the raid series itself. Granted, it has a lot of cool glamour found nowhere else. And a lot of players would do this Alliance raid simply because of their love of the Nier story itself. However, players that don't care much for the glamour or this story have no incentive to ever unlock or do it aside from the satisfaction of completing it itself, which tends to not be enough for a lot of players. Naturally, the Myths of the Realm series get a lot of advantages immediately because throughout Endwalker they are relevant as a gear catch-up system, at least on the odd-numbered patches. But unless they get some sort of content added that they unlock, they would fall by the wayside in the same way the Yorha series did once Endwalker is over. All that is to say, in comparison to the Crystal Tower series, only really the Return to Ivalice series has had any significant reason to be completed after their associated expansion ended. So it is highly likely that a lot of newer players have skipped these middle children Alliance Raid series, and yet, even if they haven't, that leads to the third reason, which is that one of the more common reasons to queue up for Alliance Raid Roulette is to level up an alt job, or in very rare cases a main job, and that means the job isn't max level. This disqualifies Myths of the Realm instantly, and reduces the chances for all the other Alliance raids too. The fact that Crystal Tower is the lowest level Alliance raid means that it is capable of being the only Alliance raid offered at all. And the fourth reason is that as all Alliance raids have an average item level requirement, and this requirement is checked against the gear your character is currently wearing, you can simply unequip items to force the Crystal Tower to be your only option. Now, please sit down, you're over there saying, "You teaching this is part of the problem." You can genuinely do this for all roulette types, but as far as I'm aware, this doesn't happen for any other roulette type, or at least not so much that it is a known trick people use. Perhaps they might for normal raids? Now, why is this specifically a problem for Alliance raids? Let me try to answer that. Roulette rewards scale with only your level, at least to my knowledge. This holds true for all roulettes except main scenario, where the reward is somewhat proportional to the length of the specific part of the MSQ roulette you happen to find yourself in. This means that aside from a rather measly bonus XP you would gain from doing, say, Circus Tower as a level 50 or close to, the reward is ultimately, relatively speaking, the same whether you do Circus Tower, Downgearing, or the Tower at Paradigm's Breach. This doesn't sound like an issue until you realize that, like MSQ Roulette, the time it takes to clear the Tower at Paradigm's Breach, as well as the effort, is far greater compared to Circus Tower, or even World of Darkness. In fact, even the possibility that you could wipe on the first boss in Downgearing makes it more time consuming than any of the Crystal Tower raids, and since the Downgearing trick only removes raids from the newest down to the oldest, that means some players would use the trick just to avoid Downgearing, even if there was a particularly easy Alliance raid in the Evilise series. There isn't, but you get the idea. They still would rather remove the risk of Downgearing. The best solution to this problem would, in my opinion, be to have the roulette reward also scale with what Alliance raid you actually get, so the more time-consuming ones give a greater reward to incentivize players to do those, rather than cheat and get the easy one every time. I have previously heard players suggest that the game should scan your inventory, your retainer's inventory, and your chocobo saddle to see if you could have a higher item level, instead of just measuring the gear you are wearing, but ultimately this would be bad for two reasons. If the roulette lands you in the Crystal Tower because you own item level 600 equipment, but you put it all on your retainer, hypothetically, but you sewn in naked, then you are stuck there, and so is everyone else, and you can legitimately do nothing in the very moment to fix that. The second reason is that forcing people into raids in this way would, in a very weird, twisted way, punish players for unlocking the harder Alliance raids, and would incentivize new players to avoid unlocking them until they have maxed out all the jobs they want. I know that is a bit of an excessive optimizer perspective to the whole thing, and I'm sure most players wouldn't care about this specific angle, but it is worth mentioning. Instead, improving the roulette rewards is also just generally seen as a benefit to everyone. Makes it easier to do the Alliance raids for those that want to, with more people eligible for them in the roulettes, but also those willingly going into them are rewarded more for their time. Now, I brought up normal raids earlier, and that's mainly because while the problem is nowhere near as egregious for this roulette, since the clear time of different normal raids are generally a lot closer to each other, there's also the part where most of them can be done in under 10 minutes, which already makes the time scale so low that a lot of players don't think about it as much, where Alliance raids can take over 30 minutes at times. However, despite all that, the fastest way to unlock normal raids, and the fastest normal raids to do, tend to be A1 and A2, and that's all you need to access the roulette. It being the lowest level raid in roulette, of course also means that the most players qualify for these two fights, plus the part where you could use the Downgearing trick to remove all but A1 to A4 from your roulette pool too. The reason why this problem would crop up here too is of course that the Normal Raid Roulette reward similarly does not really scale up in any way relative to the encounter you get. Fortunately, there are more reasons to complete and unlock raids, mounts, savage encounters, and so on. And the reason why Trials and Leveling Roulette do not have these kinds of issues at all is because their rewards, especially for Leveling Roulette, tend to scale up with higher level duties, at least in terms of the XP you get. Combine that with the fact that the clear time of most dungeons, hello normal primals, is close to the same, and most trials are close to the same. And then you simply don't have any incentive to try and trick the system much. Not even as a max level where the scaling XP does nothing. In fact, a queuing option for light parties was added that allows you to limit the leveling roulette, only the leveling roulette for some reason, to dungeons within 8 levels of your lowest party member. I think this is a pretty good sign that if the Alliance Raid Roulette, and maybe Normal Raid Roulette, reward scaled up a bit more, this might alleviate this strange issue we have had for quite a while. But that is of course just my suggestion for a solution to the problem, and of course, presenting a solution like this does not mean it gets implemented. However, I would love to hear if you have other suggestions of what could be done about this Crystal Tower problem in the comments. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me and my channel, you can make sure to let the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. And if you want to give even more support than that, you can also become a member of the channel like these wonderful people here. Fun fact, when you enter a queue for any duty, it actually snapshots your current average item level at that very moment. So if you were to use the downgearing trick, you could actually redress after clicking the join button perfectly safely, and it would work. Although, you would have to trust me to test this yourself, since it could also be that every time I have somehow been able to test this, I have just been randomly lucky?